Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 100th stream of the Art Lounge Alley. I'm your host. I'm excited to start out today. There's going to be a special intro as a way of commemorating this milestone. It's a short flick called Lucky Day Forever by Alek Wachlowski. He's a Polish artist, and he created this short flick. As you could see, beautiful art. I mean, the little details here and there to just make up this city. The music is great, the story is great, the art is great, as you could see. It is a dystopian, sort of futuristic dystopian story about, I guess, just socioeconomic conditions, other things as well. I'm not going to go too much into it just yet. I want you guys to check it out first before I talk more about it. Unfortunately, YouTube, for some reason, decided to flag it as a copyright infringement, even though I'm not claiming it to be mine. And obviously, the credit is there as well. And I'm not monetizing on it, so I'm not really sure where the copyright infringement is. But as a way for you guys to be able to still see it, I included the link to this video in the description. So pause this video, go check out this short flick, and then come back here, unpause it, to hear my commentary on it, to hear what I think about it compared to like modern day, just talk about random different things, and also continue on with today's sesh. So check out that link in the description, pause this video, and then come back to it when you're done. It's really good animation. I mean, I absolutely loved the backgrounds at the beginning, especially where you got to see the city basically and what the life was like over there, and the amount of detail that went into creating all that was beautiful. I mean, it was beautiful. It's a bit of an upsetting story, but it's not too far away from reality. I mean, the whole idea of like how form of entertainment is very basic. It appeals to our very basic instincts. The idea of just constantly like drinking and sex and like what was the other thing that they said? Oh, he totally humiliated and outclassed his rivals. That whole it's something that I talk about very often. How there's this like systemic basically brainwashing that goes on that pins people up against each other. It sells you all this like perfection and this like plastic sort of reality that everybody's trying to attain because it's pushed in their face, and it's through media. You're told that unless you look like these people, unless you do what they do and act like they do, then you're just like this quote unquote loser or whatever. So, and especially to young kids when they're still trying to like identify themselves, trying to establish themselves in society or understand things, they're very impressionable. And of course, moments of insecurity and all that, it just contributes more to it. It says, well, if you don't want to feel insecure, this is what you got to do, and it starts pushing all this advertisement on you. And if you notice, I am going to upload this as a special intro, so you guys can always rewatch this by going to the video section and filtering it based on collection. And it'll open up a folder for you. It's going to have the highlights folder. In that highlights folder, you could see all the special intros there. But yeah, if you pay attention in the beginning, when he does the transformation and he's on TV and he's like blabbing on a bunch of garbage, you could see like the other characters, they're standing there and they have like this band around their arm with like a smiley face, and it's kind of like a metaphor for that whole like Nazi regime thing, because back then they had the same thing. They had these bands on, and on the bands they had like a Nazi symbol on it. So it's just like kind of playing into that, it's just the elites, the ones who pledge to be act and contribute towards it, are the ones who are quote unquote on top, and everybody else is basically serving them. So you could see like all those people in the beginning when they're like cleaning up the place, while these robots, basically everybody who looks like everybody else, right? I mean, that's kind of like what corporations and all these like toxic sort of companies are demanding everybody to look like it, the next person, this like cookie cutter appearance, same kind of suits, same kind of hairstyles, same kind of conversations, you know, same kind of interests. Everybody is just exactly the same. So you notice like all these people in this movie, the elites, quote unquote, they all look exactly the same. And I think towards the end, I think it was pretty interesting, and it was a little bit of I guess, an open end. You know, it's open for interpretation. But the way that I saw it was, he was still in that program. You know, he was plugged in, despite it seeing as if though he broke out of it. And I think that was just his subconscious realizing what a miserable reality that is and wanting to break out of it. So instead of him actually doing it, that system made it seem as if though he is, and just appealed to his desires, his true desires, which was that woman next door, wrapped up in that perfect quote-unquote body. So really his hidden desire was to be with her, as opposed to this kind of fake plastic reality. But he couldn't break out. And then if you saw it zoom out and see him in that incubator and was plugged in and had all these different wires, what those wires were leading to were all those people who are in that system and are in those perfect quote-unquote bodies, feeding off of him. Like you saw how it's like replenishing this outer skeleton basically, while the inside is just this like rotten, nasty looking face. And I think that's just like a metaphor for what people like that who pledge to that sort of thing really feel like on the inside. So it's just like all these kind of cool hidden concepts and ideas in this like beautiful animation. I really enjoyed it. And it really does, just as I mentioned, it really does connect to modern day. It really connects to how there is this like class systemic reality that's like just completely brainwashing people, making them feel miserable, exploiting them for their own benefit, entertainment, and just like yeah. And it's interesting how they use the word parasites. They're like, oh, all you other parasites. Meanwhile, at the end you see like all those quote unquote elites feeding off of the people who are miserable, you know, who are living in terrible conditions and all. So it's just projection, basically. They're the ones who are really parasitic, feeding off of people to feel better about themselves. And yeah, so it was a really cool, powerful message, I think, done in this animation. I hope you guys enjoyed that for the 100th stream of the Art Lounge Alley. I'm going to continue on. You know, there's still time left. I'm going to continue on from yesterday's session. And it's going to be more examples of hands. It's going to follow the same approach, and I'm going to show you guys again more simplified versions and how they eventually turn into well-defined hands. And the question is, on what page? go with this one. It's a blank start. So the same approach as always, keeping it light, not pressing too hard. Trying to create the general shape, you know, no real detail, just setting parameters using the block form. I'm connecting this other shape, as you see, I'm connecting it to the block itself. Now this palm area, basically. So this shape that's supposed to define more of the thumb is really connected to that block. I'm just continuing to build on each block on top of it further and further. And as I mentioned, when it comes to the fingers, there is a gradual increase in width throughout the section. So down here, it is wider than in the middle, and then much wider than at the very tip. So that's what you guys are going to see here. And that's a really important thing to remember when it comes to drawing fingers, because it prevents you from drawing popsicle sticks, basically. And if it's a little bit intimidating to focus on all of this all at once, break it down. You know, this is something I mentioned before. The easiest way to learn all those different parts is by focusing on them individually. So you could spend, let's say, one day, which isn't enough, but at least for you to practice, spend one day focusing on, let's say, the fingers. Right, and you build out these pyramidic kind of like structures to show like gradual increase in width as it goes down to the base. Next day you focus on eyes, and the other day you focus on ears and the mouth, and you just draw them all over the page, cover them up as much as possible. Something that I like to show you guys, and what I mean is, for those of you who are just tuning in for the very first time, you can kind of see it already from me flipping through, but you know, just cover up the entire page as much as possible with specifics. Like, so if you're going to draw hands, draw it all over the page. Draw it multiple times. So you guys are going to see all of these. I'm going to repeat them again to just continue and improve. You know, improve the understanding, improve your hand-eye coordination, all those things. There's always benefits from drawing things repeatedly over and over and over again. I'd say even if you don't remember it exactly as it is, you're still practicing to improve your line work. You know, if you don't remember the pose of the hands exactly, there's still something positive that you're taking away from those exercises. And it's all those things. It's hand-eye coordination, getting well, yeah, I see it. Line work, you know, really improving your line work. So yeah, don't be discouraged if you can't remember every single thing from off the top of your head. You're doing the best thing, which is practicing your drawing skills. But it's a great way to challenge yourself as well. You know, if you don't remember it, go back and redraw it and try to memorize it and keep it fresh in your mind, and then turn the page and try to remember what you just drew, to try to like ingrain it into your memory. In that way, you can just recall it whenever you feel like it, whenever it calls for that scenario. And the more you do it with various parts of the body, with various poses or shapes, the better that's going to be for your, I guess, your visual library, your mental library. You know, it's kind of how it works. Like you're just building out your mental library. The more you draw animals, the more you draw the face and all different types of faces, hands, etc. It just kind of gets stored in your mind, and eventually it just like comes out whenever you decide to draw. Similar to something I like to bring up as an example very often, similar to the idea of reading. You know, it's not like you have to sit down and remember all grammatical laws and rules and such. Because you've practiced it, because you've done it over and over and over again, you memorized it, and now you just understand. You know the definitions without having to recite the definition in your memory, right? So drawing is the same thing. It just becomes more visual, and it has to do with visual imagery as opposed to letters and words. So, but the process is the same. The process of learning is the same. So you just have to stick it out. You know, you have to like push yourself, remind yourself that you're in the learning stage, and that eventually you won't even have to do that. You won't have to do these very technical drawings and all that. All right, so we got to the next stage within this drawing. Just do a little correction here. And I'm going to redraw this again just to show you guys, you know, what the full process is like. So again, I'm going to start out with the same approach. Going to create the box form for the hand. And notice how all the lines are following the same direction. So they're parallel to each other. Despite them getting more narrow, the lines are following one another. And something else that I discussed yesterday, which was how the fingers aren't supposed to be longer than the palm. So if you were to take like your ruler and you were to measure the longest finger on your hand, which is the middle finger, and then you were to see, well, how big is it in comparison to the palm? You could see that it's about an inch shorter. I'm going to say 1.5 inches shorter than your palm. Really, it would have to be all the way down to where the wrist area is, like right about here where you're able to bend. That would be the size of your entire palm. But as you could see, if I was to measure actually to the base of where the fingers are, it's about that long. So yeah, it's a good 1.5 inches shorter than the palm itself. So this box form, just to recite, this box form is very useful when it comes to understanding the 3-dimension of the entire object. And once you understand it 3-dimensionally, then you're able to create it in any pose that you like. Like once you understand that the base of the palm, all of this right here, is really this like box form. Like I want to say it's kind of like a matchbox, right? It's very similar to like a matchbox. So once you understand how to draw that, it's easier for you to be able to draw a matchbox in any direction, right? And that allows you to start forming it any way that you like. You could be in this pose. You could lay it down, you know, as you see it here. You could have it straight if you wanted. But this time it's angling towards the left side as opposed to the right side, how you see it here. So once you understand that, you're able to really maneuver it however you like, as opposed to the limitations of just using lines to construct it, meaning like you start out with the thumb and you draw the exterior of the thumb and then you connect it to the finger. You know, that I think is more of a gamble, right? You're just like, I hope this is long enough to actually look proportionate. I hope that it's actually going to fit within the frame. You know, you're not really, you don't have any boundaries set for how long and how wide any of the elements of the I guess, part of the body that you're drawing, whether it's the hands or it's the arm or the foot or whatever it is that you're drawing, the face. You didn't set any parameters for it, so it could end up just going off the page. It could end up being wider. The fingers could be much longer, as I mentioned, as opposed to having their limit as well. So it's just a little bit, well, it's much more, I think, open-ended. Like, you don't know where things are going to end up, in a sense. So, but by doing this, you eventually get used to seeing things proportionately in their proper size, using this technique. And then you, at some point, you won't need to use it anymore. You know, because your eye has gotten used to it, you know, you're able to just draw. So it kind of comes in full circle. A lot of people start out by drawing the exterior parts of something, whether it's the face or the hands, and then building just little by little to understanding the full dimension, like the 3-dimension of whatever it is that they're drawing, using these very technical drawings, to back again drawing from just contour lines, basically, you know, and constructing it and having it look very proportionate, because in your mind you already have a very good understanding of all those things, as opposed to how you feel about it in the beginning. You know, in the beginning there's all that uncertainty and lack of understanding of all those things. So okay, so this is the next stage, which is going to be adding certain details to try to make it look more natural, which means connecting certain parts, erasing certain parts. Now, granted, I'm pressing a lot harder than I would if I was to just do this for myself, but since I'm doing an example, I gotta have you guys see it. So there are going to be some, it's going to be kind of messy. But you guys are going to still see a very similar result. And as I mentioned before, a lot of this is just placeholders. You don't have to retrace the lines exactly where they are. You know, you could go over those lines. You could go outside of them in a sense, but at least you're still within the skeletal structure of it. You know, there is some structure underneath it to give you limits to work off of. So as you can see, once I started connecting all the joints together, once I started smoothing out these really boxy sort of edges, it starts to take shape. It starts to look more and more natural. So I know that at the beginning it could look intimidating because you're thinking like, well, how do I draw on top of that and make it look natural? You know, like the process seems kind of mysterious, you know, when you're not used to approaching it using this like block form. It leaves you a little bit clueless and hanging like, well, where do I go after I construct the block form for everything? And this is the purpose of it, just to show you guys that really there's nothing to be intimidated by. There's nothing to fear with it. You just have to go over it and start connecting things and rounding off corners. And you'll see how like naturally it'll start to look more and more realistic. And with that said, everybody, that is going to be the conclusion for Figure Drawing Basics for this week. I'm going to be back next week, Monday, same time and place for more Figure Drawing Basics, more lessons, more examples of hands. I'm going to continue working on hands for a while. In fact, I'm going to go back to some of these pages here that are kind of empty and fill them out with hands all over the place. Fill up as much of the pages as possible. So that's going to be next week. I'm going to be talking about new stuff as well. If you guys have any questions, or if you guys have any requests of like what are some things that you'd like me to talk about when it comes to the drawing, when it comes to the process, or if you have any questions in general, it doesn't even have to be related to the lessons, feel free to ask away and I'll talk about it on stream. If you guys need some advice on anything really, or advice on when it comes to drawing, you know, some things that you're going through as you're trying to learn and you want to get some perspective on, send me a message or post it in chat and I will talk about it in the next stream. All right, everybody, I'm going to take that 5-minute break. If you guys did enjoy this content, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. They're both greatly appreciated. And I'll see you in the next stream. Hello everybody, welcome to the Art Lounge Alley. This is the project stream, it's part 69. Getting further and further in this project. This is something that I'm working on from my imagination. It's a character that I was thinking about for a while. It's this robot that plays music, very soulful music. You know, is really connected with his instrument, with music in general. And yeah, he's playing music for people basically on the streets, a performer. And he's surrounded by people who are completely entrenched in technology. As you could see, every single one of them has like these goggles on, right? It's kind of like similar to like what you would see as the Oculus. But I just think it was an interesting like juxtaposition basically of like something that's robotic but incredibly connected to like soulful elements, you know, playing music, surrounded by people, you know, who are organic, who are more soulful, but completely enveloped by technology. Like they're just tuned out of reality, basically, while a robotic being is tuned in. So yeah, it's just this like contrasting sort of existence that I thought would be interesting. But yeah, he's a robotic being. He doesn't have a face. He has a screen, and on that screen emojis pop up for whatever it is that he's feeling. I'm still debating on whether actually making him talk or not, like if he has like a voice box or whatever, but you just can't see. The only face expressions you see are the ones that are on screen through the emojis. So yeah, it's just this cool concept that I had in mind, and yeah, I'm getting further and further along on it. So today I'm gonna try to work on this car here because I feel like it's too yellow. You know, the lights are yellow, the screen is yellow, so I might do something about that. I'm gonna just start by playing around with the screen a little bit, and maybe picking something along the lines of like blue, I'm gonna say. I guess that's more of like a natural window color. And then I'm gonna change the lights as well to more of a blue shade. To kind of contrast things. Or maybe that's a little too bright. For those of you who tuned in earlier, there was a special stream. I showed a 15-minute animation. It's one of my favorite animations, actually, and it was like a political statement. You know, I think a lot of it was just talking about how people are basically like manipulated by the media, while the media exploits them, and they continue to live like these kind of dismal lives, you know, and buying into what the media, the elites, basically are selling. It's a cool short film. I'm gonna post it for you guys to watch in the video section. So if you head over to the video section, Twitch channel, and you filter it based on collection, you'll see a folder that's going to open up, and well, folders rather, for all the streams that that I have throughout the week, and you guys can check out the highlights folder. That's where you're going to find a lot of these special intros, and I'm going to upload the short film there, so that way you guys can check that out. Yeah, it's definitely worth it. Beautiful animation, especially in the beginning when you get to see like the entire city, and just take your time and observe, you know, the artwork itself. Aside from the message, it's so well done, and it kind of reminds me actually of Amanita Designs, like for games like Machinarium and Creaks. Like the style, the music, it kind of reminds me a little bit of that company and the games that they create. But I did want to talk a little bit about that, because I think that it's important to highlight that even though it talks about things that are real, you know, and are really going on around us every day, that it's important to also talk about solutions, you know. So it's not just meant to you know, depress people or make them feel upset about things. It's really meant to make people think, you know, like what can we do to actually create solutions? Like what can we do to improve that, now that we know like this is what's going on? You know, where can we focus on things? So, you know, something I talk about very frequently is protesting. I think that is the most direct way that we could actually see results as people. You know, if we just stand by and let people do whatever, as you saw during the pandemic especially, nothing is going to be done. You know, nothing is going to be done to like favor our position or favor our living conditions. They're just going to continue to make things better for themselves, when their job responsibility as politicians is to take care of the economy, take care of the people that are paying their bills, basically paying their bills through taxes. So I think the best way to see direct results is by creating protests. When there's thousands of people who are on the streets day to day, that's something that's going to obstruct a lot of things for them. You know, it's not, they're not going to be able to continue to profit when the streets are packed with people, when people aren't able to get to their businesses. You know, basically just kind of shutting things down and telling them, hey, improve our conditions or you're going to have all these problems come up. You know, I think regardless of what the political outcomes are going to be or whatever else, that we have to continue to do that and push for a collective action as people. Otherwise, things like, for example, student debt, right? As you saw, that they're trying to override that, while they were giving out handouts to all these corporations, special interests, you know, all these businesses that favor them. when, again, the responsibility of being in the White House or as a politician is to take care of the people, not just yourself. So, to give out handouts to all these corporations because during the pandemic they just couldn't, give up their profits and make a bunch of profit as well. So they're not only are they getting handouts, they're also collecting all the profits from the pandemic, from all the money that people were spending from those checks that people are whining about. Like, if people have that money, so on and so forth. Well, businesses ended up benefiting from all that. But anyways, yeah, just this, again, example that whatever it is that they're saying, they're trying to brainwash you to think that you don't deserve it. Meanwhile, they don't care about that. It's not a morality thing for them at all, because, again, if that was the case, they wouldn't be asking for these handouts for corporations and, all that other stuff. It's not about that. It's not about the morality of it at all whatsoever. As you saw, their morality scale is like absolutely off. When it comes down to kids getting shot in elementary schools, they couldn't care less, and they're supporting gun manufacturing companies and supporting people having even more guns. So, there is no moral compass there. The only thing they care about is profits and how much more they could exploit people for them. So we have to take action. We have to do something to change the game, and a lot of it just has to do with that, coming together as people, protesting, creating these groups that talk about all this stuff, talking about strategies and how to approach it. Otherwise, things are just going to get worse and worse. They're going to continue to exploit people, and as we saw during the pandemic, and what caused the pandemic, it's going to destroy people's livelihood. We gotta not only, when we do protest, what's going to be the goal there? And the goal is, first of all, to improve livable wages, so that people could actually save money. They're not working for companies just to make them profits. They're working because they want to be able to save money to be able to enjoy their life. It shouldn't be just about, hey, let's go and make this company a bunch of money while we barely are able to pay bills. And the way I think about it is, if you are qualified for the job, right, you have the qualifications, you've put in the time, you've gone to college especially, and you paid good money to get a good education, or if you got a skill that is useful, that you're able to actually create things or whatever it is, you should be getting paid a livable wage. Even if you're working for, let's say you're working at a CVS as one of the associates there or something. So even if you're working there, it's necessary. You need these places. If you're working at a grocery store, they need people to work there to stock all this stuff up. So if you're qualified to do that job, you should be getting paid well. You're important. You should, that's basically what the trade is, right? The trade is you provide them with a service that they need, and in return, they pay you for it. It's not just, I provide them with the service they need, end of story. No, you should be getting enough to be able to pay bills and to be able to save money and enjoy yourself. We kind of have to change that. We have to change it so that people are valued as opposed to brainwashed and exploited for more profits. We have to create a different script, because if we don't change that, it's just going to get worse and worse. They're going to just keep making you think that you're less and less worth of better conditions. And that's not sustainable. That's not a sustainable economic system, or perpetuate a civilized society. You know, people are just going to get more and more pissed. And if we don't organize, it's just going to be anger. You know, if we don't figure out how to be collective and, you know, move things towards a progressive direction, it's just going to create violence and anger. Like, people won't know how to solve things other than crime and, you know, frustration and all that other stuff. So, you know, it's in the best interest of our lives. It's in the best interest of the people, like your family or your kids or whoever else that's going to have to deal with that in the future, to start figuring out how we can collectively bargain, basically, and say, like, listen, if you don't provide us, we're going to shut down the economy. That's basically what happened back in the early 18th, late 18th century, I guess, at the point of the Industrial Revolution. People came together and they said, look, we got to create change. They're using kids for labor. They're making us work 13 to 14 hours for no wages that don't pay anything. You know, they're making us work 6 to 7 days a week, basically. We have to do something. And that's what they did. They collected together. They came together and they basically started protesting. And then because things weren't addressed, they shut down the economy, because people were just like, we've had it. You know, we want to have better conditions. We got to hold these people responsible for the jobs that they have to do. You know, they can't just demand us to do our job while not doing theirs. We have to flip the script, and they did. And that's how we ended up having 8 hours as a work standard, as opposed to the 11 to 14 hours that they had before. So it proves through history that when people come together, that things start to change. When people start strategizing and like pushing as much as possible. Like, look at Iran. People are still protesting despite the fact that there is like you know, a dictatorship, basically, where they're arresting people for voicing their opinion and disapproval of the leadership there, the economical leadership. They're still doing it despite all that. They're still pushing for it. It's now going on to a month, you know, where they're doing this thing. And that's basically where we have to be. We have to keep pushing for this stuff and have them understand, like, this is democracy. This is about the people. It's not about an oligarchy. It's not about, you know, appeasing of the people at the top all the time. This is a place where everybody could have a good life. You know, it's one of the American values. So we have to start pushing towards that, and we have to fight against this fascist regime that's taking over, basically. You know, they lost the war. Now they're here and they're trying to reestablish or wreck things, basically wreck the American values here to continue with what they were trying to do before, which is like, you know, wiping out anybody who isn't part of that regime, isn't part of that crazy, mentally deranged regime. So we have to fight against that. You know, we have to, otherwise, you know, your grandparents, they fought for nothing. You lost your grandparents. People developed PTSD and all those problems for no reason. You know, that's awful to think about. I guess it's on people layer. Yeah, so, you know, just having to start working on that, making demands, you know, talking about livable wages, talking about progressive education systems that aren't systemically racist, that purposely make it more and more difficult for people of color or black people to get good education, progressive education, affordable education, you know, all that stuff. We have to demand that changes as well. We have to get rid of these systemically racist sort of approaches towards education systems and make them more affordable. Because, like, look at what happened. You know, you're paying a lot of money. People are paying like hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to get quality education. And during the pandemic, people weren't able to do that. They weren't able to go to the facilities, you know, have more quality, basically, education, and and now are expected to pay the full price, you know, which isn't what the trade is. The trade is, the reason you're paying hundreds and thousands of dollars isn't just to give them money, it's to get quality education. And if you didn't get that, there's no reason why you should be paying the full amount, you know, especially if you miss out on all these benefits. But because because people aren't pushing back harder, they're getting away with it more. You know, there shouldn't be a court case against it, because we've already established this, but people aren't pushing it hard enough to say, like, hey, it's already addressed. Like, we didn't get the quality we needed, therefore the price should be different. So yeah, quality education, progressive education that rids systemic racism out. You know, progressive education is what I mean. Livable wages and humane hours, because really the 8 hours thing is to say, okay, well, you know, you got to make it somewhat humane, but if you do the math, you're only left with 3 hours to yourself per day, probably less than that, you know, depending on whether you got kids, depending if you got to get some things done. So all of your day, from the time you get up to the time you get home to when you eat and you're finished, your entire day is dedicated to them and their profits. You know, that's not, what kind of a life is that? We got to create a new sort of existence. We can't continue to have that, because all it's doing is creating more crime, more drug and alcohol abuse, because people are just like trying to escape that drudgery, you know, like having to go in and out every day, the same thing over and over and over again, not even getting paid well for it, is creating that frustration. It's creating that anger, and it's rippling through society. You know, I think that we just have to get past this like zone that we're stuck in, basically. And, like, people are stuck in, ever since the Industrial Revolution, we've just kind of been stuck in this like pattern, like zombie pattern, you know, similar to that short film that I previewed, you know, where people are just like entertained by the most basic things. It's pushed on you to be incredibly basic, to fight against each other, like they were saying in that video that he was watching on TV, like, oh, I humiliated and outclassed my opponent, you know, like that that whole sociopathic and also social culture, you know, that's what people value. And it's not different from like what it is now, right? If you look at it, what people are entertained on, what you see on like mainstream television, what you see on Instagram or whatever else, like that's kind of like that basic state, you know, people fighting each other, trying to outclass each other, trying to show who's superior, who's inferior. Those are Nazi values. Superior, inferior, you know, less than, better than. That's what they were promoting, you know. So even though people won't identify themselves as one, what makes you one? It's the values, right? It's how you behave, what you think like, you know, that really puts you in that. So people are just like a mild form of it up until the point where when it calls for them to actually start acting like one, you know, which is what you saw in politics, where people are starting to like support these politicians who are trying to enact more of it. So they've been programmed to think and behave that way, and then when the time came for it, it was like a trigger, and they all started to support it as a way to justify themselves. So it's this real, like I said, it's like a really systemic sort of brainwashing to get more and more people into it, and we have to break out of that. Again, you could just look into history and see where that leads, and it's absolutely chaotic. It turns people into disgusting psychopaths, basically, and we have to change that trajectory. And that's how we go about it. Once we start demanding all those things through the nature of people getting quality educations, affordable education, progressive education, our values, our ways of thinking, our ways of interacting with each other starts to shift away from these very basic sociopathic sort of values, that we saw developing over the years, and that as I just mentioned, like how it's all pretty much incorporated into our social interaction, starting with like fraternities, and like what happens there, just following that culture. So you could see that it starts in college, and it just continues on into like corporate ladder climbing, and how that whole like superior inferior thing starts to play more and more in people's everyday lives, not just schools anymore. It's becoming like just a normal way of interacting. So we're pretty much entrenched in very toxic culture, and it's programmed. It has nothing to do with human nature, has nothing to do with what kind of people we are. The kind of people we are is dependent on our environment. It's dependent on how we learn, what we learn, right? The reason why there are people who are really good at things, and the reason why there are people who are really poor and uneducated is because of their environment. If they got the opportunities to be taught better, to have better let me see here, there you go, to have better parental guidance, which is something that's unfortunate. Some people are just born into awful, toxic parents, and they learn from that. That's what their guide is, basically. So and that ends up shaping them to be a certain way. So if we recognize that, then we understand the source of the problem is really that. It's education, right? The parents educate their kids. So schools could do better jobs, and they could offer classes like, for instance, problem solving, how to solve problems psychologically with yourself, whenever you're experiencing certain doubts or worries or frustration or challenges or whatever, classes that teach people how to navigate through that in a progressive, non-toxic and crazy way, so schools offering guidance, guidance counselors to help, like quality guidance counselors to help kids, which means they got to pay teachers well, right? Because if somebody's going to put themselves through school and have to pay a lot of money for the education, they have to come out feeling like it's worth it, so again, that's another systemic thing where teachers aren't getting paid a lot, but the college education costs a lot. So people go there and they come out and they're like, man, I wanted to do this because it's my passion, and I feel like that's really going to help society, but I'm not able to pay off my bills. Not only am I not able to pay my bills, I can't even pay my education loans. So another example of how things are systematically designed by all these corrupt politicians who want you depending on them, who want you to keep, feeling as if though you need them to be around, and you need them to make decisions, and you got to pay them taxes. They create these roadblocks. They defund public schools. They eliminate books that you have to read, that make you more smarter and perceptive. And they undermine teachers, or basically hire anybody because they need teachers in schools so that parents could go to work and make more money. It's not about quality education anymore. It's just we need babysitters so that parents could go and work for our corporations or whatever else. Trying to see where else can I make some improvements on. I'm going to say this roof right here. They seem a little too dark. So if people have livable wages, they're not going to be frustrated coming home every day being like, oh, I got to go and do it again tomorrow, and not even be able to save any money, go on vacation, take a break. If people are getting paid decent wages, if people are coming home and they have time to spend time with their family, to do something that they love, they'll be at ease. They'll be able to go and get better education, which means better decisions. They're not going to do things out of frustration to get more time to themselves, to get people speeding in highways to try to get things done quicker or whatever, so that they could have more time to themselves to do what they like. If people have work for 5 hours, fair exchange, some part of your day goes to them for their profits and for you to be able to pay your bills, to come back home and to enjoy yourself and your time. If people have that, if they have quality education, if they got decent wages, if they're getting decent hours, all those things can ripple through, just like we see other negative traits rippling through. If positive traits are rippling through, we're going to have much better, more progressive society, as opposed to going through the same problems over and over and over again for the sake of some deranged groups of people. This story, this same scenario has been going on for generations. People have been fighting this since 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. You watch any movies that talk about political and economical conditions, and they'll say the same thing. They'll say there is, where is that? Yeah, I thought it's, oh right, I got the selections on. They'll say the same thing. Schools aren't getting funded well. People aren't getting paid livable wages. Inflation is going up. So we got to change the script. It's boring to hear the same problems over and over again, the same struggles. And the way we do that is by coming together and protesting the same way people are protesting in Iran, day after day, constantly being on the streets, demanding all these changes that I was talking about. And creating all those problems, and it's going to be a huge issue for them, because they're going to see it's a movement. These people aren't kidding around. We're losing money. We're not able to produce things, and if the economy shuts down, then so do our profits. So they're going to have to listen and have things change. And also, having streets filled with thousands and thousands of people pissed, that's going to send a big message. So if older people are brainwashed enough to just not do anything about it and just serve things, as a younger generation, you guys have a better opportunity, by filling up the streets, and demanding all of this stuff. And it is you that they depend on for exploitation. All these TV shows and the values that they talk about, they're conditioning you to eventually be Uh-oh. Look at all these mistakes. This is the problem. I got carried away, and now I got these random marks. I just have to see where they are, which layer it's on. Oh. I see it. It is buildings, right? Yeah. Merge them. Okay. Now we gotta find, there is this other problem here. And that's also, what it's also going to do is it's going to ripple through to other places as well. Like, people will start to see, like, hey, there's a big movement, and there are all these people who are standing up for better conditions, you know. Where is that? I'm going to merge these. Uh-oh. Okay, I did merge the right ones. Yeah, so it's gonna ripple through, and other places are gonna notice that, and more people are gonna start pushing for the same change. So there's gonna be a really good effect once people start doing that. Yeah, you know, if we're idle, if we're standing idly by, if we're buying into this like fascist culture of like superior, inferior, it's all meant there to divide people as much as possible. There are people who are advocating for it as well, because they just, first of all, they sign up for the fascist principles and values. So there's going to be people who are going to try to oppose it. But we've all seen where all that has led in the past as well. And there's so much evidence to prove what they're talking about completely false. You know, it's just something that they get off of. It's a lot of people who are insecure, and they need to put other people down in order to feel of certain value. You know, that is their value. So it's a mental sickness, and to pay attention to those people is just a waste of time. You know, we got to move towards a progressive direction that doesn't repeat all these problems. I see more stuff here. Just gonna collect all this stuff and sort them out into the right layers. think people are glued right now trying to, see what's going to happen politically with all these midterms and stuff. And I just think that it's a waste of time to focus on it. It is important to contribute towards trying to build on it. There are people who are trying to make things better, but I think it's more important that people start to band together and create these like social movements to pose and balance things out a little bit when it comes to politicians, for them to know like, hey, if we don't actually do our job and if we keep exploiting people will come together and they're going to overthrow everything. So I think it's important that people start building that for that reason. The more people are going to be divided, the harder it's going to be for that to happen, which is what they've been doing. I mean, just like that, as I mentioned, like all those forms of entertainment that are kind of brainwashing people and trying to separate them and pin them against each other. It's for that reason. They're trying their hardest to do that for that specific reason. And I think if you guys take the time actually and just imagine what your days would be like if you only worked 5 hours per day. When you would come home, how much time you would have left, what you could do with that, and what opportunities you would have, like to spend time with your family, to hang out with friends, to taking on a hobby, whatever it is, learning new things, going to school, having time to do that actually, and then just remember what it's like now. I think you would feel a little bit more motivated to believe that that is a better outcome. And not only that, but it would also provide more jobs, because they would have to have split shifts, right, to keep businesses open later, to be able to to continue their business. So if they have split shifts, there's going to be more jobs, more businesses would stay open later, more people would be working. So there's multiple benefits towards it. Economically, it would be better. Individually, it would be better for every person. Progressively, it would be better. So like forming these groups, forming these protests, and having these people demand these changes, sending out a clear message to politicians, like what are we protesting about, what do we want changed, and having these very specific things, listed on protest signs, talking about, we need this, and this to be enacted, and we won't stop protesting until that happens. I think that would send a clear message, because sometimes I look at these protests and people are out on the street and they're saying like, our environment is dying, hands off my body or whatever. They're throwing these slogans out, but they're not saying like what needs to be enacted for change. Like what exactly are they looking for in order to have enacted, to have changed. I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls when it comes to protests. Like there's no clear message there. They're just complaining, they're just saying like, I don't like this. And that's pretty much it. But if people have like demands, basically the same way that people did in the 1800s when they were like, we want 8 hours instead of 13 to 14 hours. We want livable wages. We want to work 5 days a week instead of 7 or 6. We want this to be law. They were really pointing at a specific resolutions. Whereas a lot of these protests, like, what resolutions are you pointing at? It doesn't seem like they're pointing at anything, really. There's some people who argue like, oh, there's just so many people out there who are just like, committing crimes and doing crazy things and all that. And it's like, yeah, they're doing that because we have a terrible system in place. We don't have proper education. We don't have education systems that offer solutions to these people, to offer them training, to help them improve themselves, give them better guidance psychologically. All that kind of stuff. And it's a long time process. It's not something that you're going to snap your fingers and instantly everything is going to be better. Like, even if the things that I'm talking about are enacted, that's a process that's going to take time to ripple through generationally, and we'll see benefits then. We'll have more and more people going to school and getting the proper education instead of not being able to afford it and, resorting to all sorts of crime and addiction and all that other stuff, and violence, all that. So yeah, it's not going to be an immediate thing, and I think people have to understand that. And there are people who absolutely do understand it, but that's just their way of trying to gaslight somebody out of supporting that. There are a lot of racist people, and that's just a waste of time. It's something, again, that has to be addressed in schools. Kids have to be taught the right progressive direction that teaches people to interact with each other as people, not as races or whatever else. Just human decency, not decency towards black people, decency towards white people or whatever. It's just this idea of decency all around. Like what sort of scenarios most people come across, having those kind of discussions in classes, and having people volunteer their experiences and talking about them like that is helpful. Like a humanities class, basically, and making it a requirement just as much as math classes, history classes, science classes. Like, all those are required for people to excel in and graduate. So it should be just as much of a requirement. That's a necessary thing to function as a normal human being, to understand all those things, to learn how to problem solve and interact with people in society. But instead of that, they have fraternities that talk about superior, inferior, less than, better than, alpha, beta, like that garbage. That's their social structure that they're imposing on people, as opposed to actually educating people on all those things that I was talking about earlier. Like, that benefits people, not this other crap. other stuff like the fraternities, sororities, or whatever. That's all fascist garbage. You know, it doesn't really help people grow and become better people. It just contributes towards fascist regime. Sociopathic behavior, where people get a rise out of humiliating and diminishing people for the sake of establishing these social hierarchies that are just destructive. And shame on all these institutions, really, that support all that, like these education systems that encourage it. It's so archaic, and they're still not trying to like reframe that, or create different forms of connections for people and interaction. Yeah, I saw like another article about how like another fraternity was responsible for spiking drinks. You know, that's such a common story coming from those sort of what are they called? I don't know. Groups. Just gonna say groups. Like those sort of groups. It's always a common story there. You know, Brett Kavanaugh is another one, and he had an entire case about how they like raped this woman. You know, sexism and violence is a huge common theme with these places. And it's like breeding really toxic people with awful values. Trying to see where else there might be a layer mismatch. But I think most of it is right. So that's my long rant, ladies and gents. I'm still going to be, you know, discussing it. I think it's important to keep it fresh in mind. Discuss it with your friends, you know, talk about it. Share your thoughts and opinions here on the stream. You know, what do you think about all that? What are your experiences in some of the topics that I mentioned? You know, we should get that conversation going and have that conversation with other people as well. You know, see what they think about it. It's a little too dark. Well, everybody, it's slowly coming to a close for this week. I will be back next week, and tune in next week for another special intro, which is going to be Gil Elfgren. I'm going to continue on with part 5, talking about more of Norman Rockwell's work. I'm going to introduce you guys to other artists that have inspired Gil Elfgren. So I'm pretty excited about that. It's going to be fun to show you guys all their work and beautiful paintings that they created. Yeah, so that's going to be next week. If you guys do enjoy this content, remember to hit the like and subscribe button. They're greatly appreciated. And I'll see y'all next week.